Good morning, everyone. For some of you, it would be good afternoon. I'm Praying Medic, and if you're wondering why I've called you all here, this is a special edition of something like Supernatural Saturday. It is Saturday, it is the usual time, but it's not the second Saturday of the month, and we're not going to be talking about the supernatural. We are going to be talking about emergency preparedness and off-grid communication. Because I had a couple of interesting dreams lately. And as a lot of you know, God speaks to us through dreams. I take my dreams seriously. Had a dream, I think 3 nights ago, where I saw someone asking 7 questions about about relevant issues at this time. And they wrote out their answers, and I thought they were kind of trite and not very helpful. So someone in the dream, someone came up with 7 better questions and answered them on a live stream. And I thought, okay, well, that's a call for me to do a live stream and answer questions about emergency preparedness and off-grid communication. So that is the purpose of this live stream. And let me tell you about the dream I had last night, just as a side note. So last night's dream, let's see. I'll tell you the dream, and then I'll tell you my interpretation of it. In the dream, war had broken out here in the United States. And it wasn't information war. It wasn't 5th generation war. It was conventional warfare with military troops. And I had to go and find a different vehicle. So in the dream, this vehicle was kind of an abstract concept. It wasn't like, I went and got a new Toyota truck or something like that. It was an abstract idea, a concept, this new vehicle that I needed. And the vehicle was needed because it had capabilities that I was going to need during this war. And I had to obtain some kind of special insurance coverage. And it wasn't even really insurance coverage. It was some kind of indemnity, some kind of protection on this vehicle that was not normal car insurance. Right? So that's the dream. There were a lot of other details in the dream that I'm not going to go into. But that dream has caused me to understand, it's another piece of the puzzle that is helping me understand where we're going, what we're moving toward. Big picture view. And this is not the first dream I've had that talks about the subject of war. I've had a dream about 10 years ago where I saw foreign airplanes bombing the west coast of the United States. And I've had other dreams related to war that have portrayed warfare here in the U.S., on our homeland. And I think that is an eventuality that we cannot escape. So, of course, people are going to, wonder, well, aren't you speaking that into existence? Shouldn't you be praying against that? Yes, we should be praying against it. I'm not speaking it into existence. I can't speak into existence a war of a global proportion. I don't have that authority to do that. I have the authority to speak into existence new cartilage and new bones and new, retinas in people's bodies. I don't have the authority to speak into existence a war. I do not come into agreement with the enemy's plans for war. I pray every single day against the enemy's plans for war. And so sharing revelation about war is not antithetical to praying against it, making declarations against war. You can do both. Okay? If God reveals to you something frightening that's coming, you should absolutely pray against it. Do everything you can to prevent that thing from happening. On the other hand, you can also take steps to prepare for it in the event that it comes to pass. Right? I can walk and chew gum at the same time. And there's nothing wrong with, and the biblical model of prophetic ministry is revealing what God is showing you and then urging people to, pray against it and do what they can to prevent it from happening. So, Denise and I pray every day against the plans for war because we can see what's going on in the world. The deep state has been wanting war for decades. They continually give us these wars from Vietnam, wars in Central America, wars in Africa, wars in Asia, everything from Afghanistan and Iraq to, the recent war in Israel and the war in Ukraine. They just want war. That's what they want. And they seem determined to do it. And in fact, I think there's little that we can do to stop that from happening. Like I said, pray against it. But I suspect that we're going to see war here on the homeland eventually. So what do we do about that? That's what this broadcast is about. If we do enter into a time where there is war here on the homeland in the U.S., military conflict, what do we do about that? How do we prepare for it? That is what I want to talk about for the next hour and a half. And I'm just going to take questions from listeners. I have some specific strategies and tactics that God has given me over the last 3 years, which we'll talk about. But I'm going to open this up to questions from the listeners. And let's see. So Todd Sullivan, if you're on the live stream, did you have your hand up in the app? I'm going to call on you if your hand is up. If your hand is up and you don't want to talk, don't have a question, then put your hand down. All right. Todd Sullivan, your hand is up. And if you can unmute yourself, Todd, what is on your mind? Todd, hit the little unmute button on the screen. And Todd looks like he's gone. All right. Fun times. Well, no, he's still there. Todd, are you able to unmute yourself?
There. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay. So I guess my question is, and I'm sure everybody else is probably thinking the same thing, what does this war look like? And, how does it start? And who's going to start it?
Okay. Fair question. I'll take a swing at that. All right. So I'm in touch with a lot of prophetic people, and they receive dreams on a regular basis and visions and revelation from God about current events and what's coming. And my best guess about what is coming, based on just aggregating a lot of revelation from various people, I think we are going to experience a false flag terrorist attack here in the United States in the not too distant future, certainly before the election in 2024. I would guess probably in the first few months of next year. I think, and possibly sooner. If you pay attention to what the FBI and DHS and other intelligence agencies are saying, they are kind of panicking about the terror threats right now, especially with all of these people coming through the southern border, many of which we know are connected to terror organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. I suspect we're going to see some kind of terrorist attack here on the homeland. I think most of the mainstream media and politicians will immediately declare that it was an attack by some group. some ethnic group, some racial group, some terrorist group, some whatever. Could be a white supremacist group, could be, Hezbollah, who knows. A group will immediately be blamed for the attacks. That group and the people that support that group will be marginalized and then demonized. And I suspect that this whole thing is going to be a setup, like every other event that happens that is used as a pretext for war. You just think about 9/11, okay? Most people know 9/11 was an inside job. It was an operation that was coordinated by CIA and other agencies to create a pretext to have a war in Asia. That's what they wanted, and that's what they did. January 6th was a false flag. They needed to frame Trump supporters and MAGA as violent extremists so they could push an agenda, take a bunch of people as political prisoners, demonize, marginalize us, surveil us, harass us, and paint us as enemies of the state. That's what they did. January 6th, false flag. Those of you who are following Q, you are probably aware of the Whidbey Island missile launch that Q suggested was an attempt by the deep state to start a war with North Korea, because the missile was launched while Trump was on his way to meet with Kim Jong-un. They tried to start a war with a missile launch, false flag. So most of the wars that the United States ends up in are started by intentional operations that the CIA and other agencies put into play, and then they blame somebody else for it, and we go to war. I think we're going to see something like that in the near future. I think we'll see an attack here domestically that will be used as a pretext for war. Congress will go and declare war, and who that entity is, I don't know. It could be Iran. The usual suspects are Iran, China, North Korea, Russia, countries like that. Although it could be some other entity. We don't know. Hard to say. I do think it's going to probably be a false flag attack. My perspective on this is I would suspect it's a CIA operation until proven otherwise. No matter what the media says, no matter what the politicians say, I would immediately suspect it's a false flag until there is absolute, hardcore, irrefutable proof that it was not a false flag attack. And look, here's where this is going, I think. The global communist regime, if you just look at what they're doing, look at what they've been doing, look at what they've been saying over the last 7 or 8 years, you can tell what their agendas are. They want censorship. They want to shut us up. They do not want us out there on social media waking up normies to the realities of institutional corruption. They want to shut us up. So one of their agendas is to silence us. And they've tried through social media engineering. They've tried to suspend our accounts and take down our YouTube channels and everything else. And it hasn't worked. So what do they do next? All right. You'll see where this is going. What else do they want to do? They want to portray us as violent domestic extremists, as people who need to be thrown in jail and our ideologies erased from the consciousness of mankind. They want to demonize us, marginalize us, and they need a reason to do that. Okay, that's 2. They want to take away our liberties. They want to take away the Second Amendment. They want to take away our guns so that we will be helpless citizens who will be forced into their 15-minute cities and their little high-rise ghettos, where they can sequester all of us into these little ghettos, open up all of the rest of the country and the world to mining and exploitation, where they rape and pillage the land and keep us as few of us as necessary to serve their purposes. Depopulation is another goal that they have. right? So control, censorship, take away the Second Amendment, control our ability to go, to move. Those are all things that they want to do. If we end up in a domestic military action here in the U.S., where if Congress declares war, President then has access to the War Powers Act. And the War Powers Act gives the president almost unlimited authority to censor us, take away our civil rights. So during World War II, they suspended all ham radio operations, except for a small group of people who were basically used as mouthpieces for the administration. They had some ham radio operators who were willing to put out the information that they were given, put it out on amateur radio. Everybody else on amateur radio was prohibited from transmitting during World War II. They shut it all down. They shut down all domestic communication by radio, other than what was sanctioned by the regime. They can do that again. And in fact, Rand Paul has been sounding the alarm on the fact that the FCC there is a provision that the FCC put in place in the 1930s that essentially gives the president total control over the internet, over all communications, if he needs it, and it would be probably utilized as part of the War Powers Act. The War Powers Act gives the president almost unlimited authority. He can declare martial law. What happens when martial law is declared? Constitutional rights are suspended. You lose your right to free speech. You lose your right to freedom of assembly. You lose your right to carry firearms. You lose your right to have a speedy trial by a jury of your peers. All those constitutional rights are suspended during martial law. And those are things that they want to do. They desperately want to take away our guns, take away freedom of assembly, take away freedom of speech, and they really want to be able to take away our right to a speedy trial by a trial of a jury of our peers. So they can accomplish much of their agenda if they are able to create a situation where they can declare war, impose martial law. They can then steamroll us or try to. And I think that's sort of their end game. And you know, this is just me spitballing. I don't have any secret squirrel insider information. I don't have anybody in the NSA or the Trump administration who's feeding me secret information. I get revelation from God. My friends get revelation from God. You know, spitballing what I think might be their issues and their agenda. I think that's what's coming. All right. Let's see. Lane Adams. Lane, you have your hand up. If you can unmute yourself, what is on your mind?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I jumped on a little late, but I wanted to ask, I'm in a local group that's, a parent advocate kind of a group, and we're, conservative, whatever. But it's interesting because in our area, the conservative leaders are really, really riding the fence and not showing up, and so everybody's getting really frustrated with that. So like when it comes to all of this, and as far as like censorship, and should we just still keep in our local areas trying to move forward and speak truth and do all the things? Like, just, it feels so fake. Like the whole thing feels so fake because those who are in leadership, like public servants that have been elected under, what we thought they were going to do, aren't speaking up. And then, the name calling starts, and it's really odd. It's like they're turning us into these extremists. It's very odd. Anyway, just wanted your thoughts on that.
No, I think we need to do exactly what you're saying. They're going to try to marginalize us and to paint us as kooks and conspiracy theorists and extremists because we're pushing them and asking them to take a stand for traditional conservative values, which a lot of them don't want to do. They want to go along with the mainstream narrative, whatever the media is pushing, whatever political agenda is being pushed by social engineers. They want to go along with those people because they don't want to be called out by the media, by the press, and get some bad PR in the newspaper or on TV. So we are putting them in a bad position because we're exposing their hypocrisy. We're exposing their lack of commitment,
integrity,
integrity, and commitment to conservative values. You absolutely need to be doing what you're doing.
Okay, thanks. It feels so, it's unbelievable because so many of them, ran on, you thought back in the day that they were the ones that were running on conservative values. They even call themselves Christ followers. Like, it's just crazy. And you're just sitting there going, why aren't you speaking up? This is crazy. But anyway, okay.
Yeah, that's the exact reason why I really don't like politics, and I don't respect politicians. I hold most of them in contempt because for the last 40 years, I've been very well aware of the fact that politicians will tell you whatever they think you need to hear to get themselves elected. And when they get in office, they do exactly the opposite of what they said they stand on. There are a few exceptions, and I respect the few exceptions, but there aren't many. And we need to change that.
Yeah, and I'll stop here. But I agree with you. I don't like politics at all. I've never been involved in politics at all. But it's like, I don't know how we function, especially at the local level, without getting involved, even though I can't stand, I literally can't stand it. But
it's okay. Tough. But if we don't do it, we're going to lose our country. So, all right. Thank you for your thoughts. Appreciate it. Get my glasses on here. Shannon Bennett. Shannon, you have your hand up. If you are able to unmute yourself, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Hey, thanks for all you and Denise do. So my 24-year-old daughter lives in New York post-graduation. She's a little bit woke, thinks I'm a little bit crazy. I live in Georgia, and I have listened to many of your interviews. I've got your preparedness book that I have not finished reading yet. But my question is, maybe I've missed it somewhere, but is there any way to have communication with her if the grid goes down, so to speak, so that I can get her home to me or know that she's okay? Does that make sense?
That's a good question. All right. So let me go through some of the options. All right. I have kids who live 1,500 miles from me, and they are not ham radio operators. Ham radio is cool. Amateur radio is cool because it allows you to talk to people across state lines, across other side of the country, actually around the world. I am able to communicate with people in Japan and Korea and China and Europe and Africa with my amateur radio license. The problem is getting an amateur radio license is not really easy. It takes some studying, and if you're going to communicate two ways, you have to have two people who are licensed, and they both have to have radios. You have to be on the same frequency at the same time, right? And there's a lot of people who do that, but it's not a practical solution when you have a recently graduated, college kid who is not hip to what's going on, right? So I'm fortunate my kids are hip to what's going on. My son actually had a dream 6 months ago or so. He messaged me in the morning, goes, "Dad, holy crap, I had the worst dream last night. We were at World War III had broke out. There was fighting. It was crazy." He was quite disturbed by the dream. And my daughter is somewhat prophetic too. She has dreams that are similar. So my kids know, they know what's coming. God's speaking to them about it. And so what I did with them is I bought them a Zoleo. Zoleo is a little device that looks like about the size of a pager. It's a satellite communicator. And they've got Zoleos and I've got one. And if we need to communicate not using cell phone service, what Zoleo does, it's a satellite communicator. It pairs your phone to a satellite network by Bluetooth. Okay? So you don't need cellular service to communicate with Zoleo. If your cell phone provider goes offline for whatever reason, or her cell phone provider goes offline for whatever reason, and she doesn't have a signal, she can't get it. Zoleo, and there are other manufacturers. Stick makes one. Garmin makes several versions. These are all satellite communicators. A lot of them work on the Iridium satellite network, but there are other networks out there. They're a bypass for times when cell networks are not working or not available. So as a workaround for cellular networks going down, satellite communicators are a decent option. When Zoleo is on sale, they're about $150. Normal price is around $200 per unit. Data plans start at $20 a month. And you get a limited number of messages. You send text messages, basically. There's an app. You have the app on your phone. You compose text messages in the app, and then you send them. And when your phone is connected to the satellite communicator, it sends a message to the satellite network. And if your other party has their Zoleo device on and their phone on and paired, they can get the messages. Right? Again, a lot of this requires two people to have the same device and be connected and all that. If they're not on the network, if they're not connected, it's not going to work. And with Zoleo, you can actually send messages to emails, any email and any phone number, even if the person's not on the Zoleo network. That's why I like Zoleo over some of the other ones. Here's the drawback of that system. Satellite communication still relies on ground-based internet servers. So those messages, like I send a message to my son, for example, my device sends a message to a satellite, and the satellite picks up my transmission, all right? And then it relays that transmission through ground-based internet servers. And that message goes through internet gateways, goes to another satellite that my son is connected to, and that satellite delivers the message to his receiver and then his phone. But it goes through internet gateways, and that's the problem. If there is a widespread shutdown of the internet, satellite devices are probably not going to be able to communicate. They're a good workaround when the cellular networks are not available. But if the internet goes down, satellite internet and satellite communication devices are relying on ground-based internet servers. And I know there's a lot of people out there who think, oh man, I'm good. I've got Starlink. Elon's going to take care of us. We've got Space Force and it's all set up and it's going to be ready to go. Well, no, it's not. Until Elon is able to put his this data servers in space, all of that data that has to go through, that comes to you through your satellite receiver, all that data goes through ground-based internet servers. And if they lock down those ground-based internet servers, Starlink is going to be offline. And so is every other satellite commitment. I talked to a Zoleo customer service representative and technician, and that's what he told me. He said, look, this service is designed for people who are backcountry hiking and sailing and camping who are not able to get a cell signal. It's not designed to bypass the internet. It relies on the internet for services. And the guy said, if you have a widespread internet outage, our service is going to be offline. So to answer your question, it's very, very difficult to communicate over long distances with your kids, relatives, friends, and family, without cell phone and internet service. There are ways to do it, but it is tricky. And here's the reality that people need to come to grips with. We have had phone service available to us for about 100 years. Phone service was available in the 1920s. It wasn't very common. It was much more common in the 40s and 50s. Ever since then, the world has communicated using phones. First, we used wired phones. Okay, those of you who are Gen Z, we actually had phones that had to be wired to a network system through copper lines and the copper lines were all connected. There was no such thing as a wireless phone back in the 1960s and 70s and 80s. It didn't exist. They don't exist today very much either. Those of you who have a landline phone, most of you who have landline phones do not have copper wired phones. You have a phone that delivers data over internet. Almost all telecom providers have gone to data over internet, voice over internet. There are very, very few copper wired phones anymore, analog phones, true analog phones. Almost everything is over the internet. In the event of an internet disruption, most of those landline phones are going to be offline. And this is something that people really need to spend some time thinking about. If we lose internet and cell phone service, we're not just going kind of back in time technology-wise to the days before the internet. We're going back to the days before telephone. We're going back 100 years in time. And at that time, most people communicated by writing letters and sending them through the postal service. A loss of technology of this scope is going to massively affect people's lifestyles. And we haven't even talked yet about if they take down the internet and cell phone service, or if we have a cyber attack or some other coronal mass ejection that takes out satellite networks, we lose access to banking, online banking, credit card, debit card transactions. That stuff is all gone. It's immediately toast. What do people do then? How do you pay for, hamburger at the grocery store if you don't have your credit card and they can't make the transaction? You have to have cash. And how much cash do you have? And how much cash does the grocery store have? And there are many, many different logistical issues that this is going to cause. If we lose cell phone service and we lose internet service for whatever reason, it causes a massive headache for everyone. So again, back to your question. It's going to be very difficult to communicate with people who are long distances away. I have some pre-designated instructions for my kids. If the poo hits the fan and they're not able to communicate with me, and they end up in a situation where their neighborhood is not safe, they can't stay in their house anymore, we have prearranged instructions. I would strongly suggest that if you are concerned about these issues, talk to your loved ones and ask them to buy into a prearranged plan where you're going to meet and communicate and do whatever you need to do. And look, I get it. If you have kids who just think you're a crazy old boomer who doesn't know anything, it's going to be tough. They're probably going to have to learn some hard lessons. There's a lot of young people who just have no respect for their parents. They think their parents are dumb, ignorant, don't understand anything. technologically clueless, which some people are, but there are just some people who have no respect for the wisdom and the life experiences that we've garnered over our lifetimes. And it's unfortunate, but some of those youngsters are going to get hit in the mouth pretty hard when reality comes knocking on their door. Some people have to learn the hard lessons of life because they're too arrogant and too proud to learn from people who are a little more seasoned than them. And I will land it there. Find another person who's got their hand up. Hey, Pat Highland. Pat Highland. There's a little mute button thingy on the screen. If you can tap that and unmute yourself.
Okay, here it is.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning. So I have a For Patriots solar radio.
Okay.
And it has a crank on it, and my
Me
kids have
too.
them, and my kids have them too. But my son's in the Navy, and he's at Norfolk, and then my daughter's down in Charlotte, and I'm in Central Virginia.
Okay.
But I don't know that I can communicate with them with this thing.
Nope, you can't.
Yeah, so
It's
yeah.
receive only. Those little radios are just receivers. They're going to receive AM and FM radio signals, and some of them will receive some of the shortwave radio bands. Most of them have a weather band. They'll be able to receive NOAA weather alerts and weather information, but they're not built for transmitting, so you're not going to be able to communicate with other people using them.
Yeah. Okay. And also, I just wanted you to know that somebody claiming to be you while this is on has been texting with me, trying to get me to put money in a Bitcoin account. So,
well, I suggest you block them and report them, because I do not send random messages to anyone on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or
it's on this.
Telegram. It's a scammer. On Telegram.
Yeah,
Telegram is full of scammers who pretend to be channel owners, and they're always running these scams to get you to, send them money for their cryptocurrency scam. Just block them and report them.
Okay, how do you report such a thing?
Usually when you get one of these messages from someone who's not in your contact list, there will be options to report the account and block the account, and just check those check boxes and then hit okay.
Okay. I used to have a ham radio license when I lived in Texas, but
you can get it again.
It lapsed, and I have a real old primitive ham radio. But,
if it's a tube radio, it'll probably be still working.
No, it's not tube. It's a handheld.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, with a big magnetic antenna that you can put on your roof of your car.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
But
everything old is new again, and you might want to look into maybe re-upping your ham license. You can take the test and get certified again. You don't have to do Morse code, by the way. It's not required.
Yeah, I had a no code originally too, but I'm trying to learn Morse code.
Yeah, it'd probably be a good idea.
Okay. So, I'll just contact the FCC, I guess, and try to get
if you go
back.
to the FCC website, there is a process for renewing an expired ham license. It's a little bit shorter than doing it if you've never done it before.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
You bet. Suzanne, you've got your hand up. If you can unmute yourself, what is going on this morning?
Oh, me?
Yes, you, Suzanne.
Hey, thanks. Good day, sir. Okay, so I've got a double part question. My son is down in Brooklyn. I'm about 3.5 hours north of him. So I want to know, one, the best small radio to communicate if I was able to drive down part way to pick him up if he started walking, should anything hit the fan. And I need looking for a small handheld radio that maybe will communicate 30 to 40 miles, 20 miles out, something like that. And the second part would be if there was an EMP attack, the cars will be unable to operate. Is that correct? And if so, is there a device that can be installed to protect the car's electrical system so that it can function?
Okay. I will address all of those questions. All right. So, oh gosh, you're in kind of a difficult situation with respect to communicating with your son. Handheld radios, by their very nature, by the nature of the way radio signals travel, and by the limitations imposed on handheld radios, they're generally only good as distance-wise up to less than 10 miles transmitting. And at 10 miles, you have to use a special kind of antenna to even get 10 miles out of a handheld radio. Most handheld radios, you're looking at 3 miles, 2 to 3 miles, maybe 4 miles range with a handheld radio. Doesn't matter what kind it is. The power limitations and the antenna limitations on those kind of radios just limit them to very short distances. So you're not going to be able to communicate with somebody using a handheld radio by itself. Just 2 handheld radios talking to each other, 3 to 4 miles. If you use a Yagi antenna, special antenna that increases the gain, and you point the Yagi antennas at each other, you might get 10 miles out of those handheld radios. But there's severe limitations on that. Now, having said that, if there is a repeater nearby that you can use, a repeater is an elevated radio that operates at higher power. And if your handheld radio can connect to a repeater, and that repeater will then rebroadcast your message at higher power over a larger area, you may then be able to communicate with the other person if they are on the same frequency at the same time, and if they can receive the message from that repeater. There is a way to do that without becoming an amateur licensed radio operator. Most people who want to talk using repeaters get their amateur radio license. The technician is the lowest level license. And at the technician level, what most people do when they get their amateur radio technician license is they operate on UHF and VHF radio bands using repeaters. So you have your handheld radio, you transmit your message, it goes to the repeater, the repeater hears your message and retransmits it at higher power, and you can talk to people 50, 60 miles away. Okay, that's generally how people get into using repeaters with handheld radios. There is another option, General Mobile Radio Service, GMRS. GMRS is similar to ham radio, except you don't have to take a test to get a license. So to be licensed to use GMRS radios, you need to apply with the FCC, give them $35. There's no test. You just give them your $35. They give you a call sign, and you can then operate on GMRS frequencies. And there are some frequencies in the GMRS spectrum that are set aside for repeaters. And many municipalities, many cities in the area, urban but also suburban areas, have open to the public GMRS repeaters. You can go on mygmrs.com and find GMRS repeaters near you. And so one of the things you might want to do if you're thinking about how do I communicate with people if we lose cell phone, lose internet, GMRS radio is a good option if you have a repeater nearby. There is a repeater. There's actually a couple of repeaters, GMRS repeaters here in the Phoenix area that are, one of them is 87 miles away. The other one is, I think, almost 100 miles away. And I can make contact with those repeaters from my house. Okay. Now, those repeaters are on mountaintops that are 5,000 feet of elevation. So there's nothing blocking the line of sight transmission. And if you have a repeater that's on a very, very high location and you're a long ways away, you can open that repeater up and talk to people that are a far, far distance from you. I can talk to people in northern Arizona from down here in Phoenix using that repeater because it's on this mountaintop. So GMRS is an option if there is a repeater in your area. And like I said, go on mygmrs.com. I think that's the name of the website. And look and see if there is a publicly available GMRS repeater in your area. If there is, then you might want to start thinking, hey, can I talk to my kids? Would I be able to make communication with them within, 25, maybe 40, 50 mile range? Depending on where you live, depending on where that repeater is located. If the repeater is located, let's say 25 or 30 feet above ground level, you're going to have a pretty small footprint for that repeater. It'll be able to broadcast 10 or 15 miles, maybe 20 miles. But if it's on the top of a skyscraper, let's say 800, 900 feet high, that repeater should be able to broadcast a pretty big footprint, large area. Again, that all depends on the elevation of the repeater, how much power is the repeater putting out. GMRS radios are limited. Handheld radios, you can buy 7 and 8 and even I think now 10 watt radios, handheld radios. GMRS handheld radios, generally 5 watts. And again, a 5 watt radio is good for, if you're not using a repeater, 5 watt radio will get you about 3 or 4 miles of distance. And mobile radios typically are powered up to 20 watts, some models, and other models 50 watts. A 50 watt mobile radio with a good antenna will actually get you out a pretty good distance. We're talking, if you have an antenna on your house and you have a 2-story house, so your antenna is better than 20 feet above ground, 25, maybe 30 feet above ground, and you've got a mobile radio in your house that's putting out 50 watts, you could probably talk to people and hear conversations 40, 50, 60 miles away. Depending on terrain, if there's a lot of trees, a lot of buildings, a lot of mountains, it's going to be more difficult. But if it's relatively flat, you'll have pretty good range with a 50 watt radio and an antenna on your roof. Now, there are other options. Marine radio. Marine radio does not require a license. And marine radio can be used anywhere. It's designed for people that are operating on waterways, but you can use marine radio anywhere. Radios are powered up to, I think the power limit on marine is 25 watts for mobile radios, 5 watts typically for handheld, and no license. It's open to the public. Marine radio has, I think, 82 different frequencies that it operates on. Again, if you have a radio that operates on the marine bands and you have a good antenna, you might be able to make communication with people 30, 40 miles away, 50 miles away. There are many options. And all of that information is covered in the book, Emergency Preparedness and Off-Grid Communication. I cover every conceivable way to communicate off-grid that does not require internet or cell phone service. Everything I'm talking about can be done with battery-operated radios that can be powered by solar panels and solar chargers. All right. So to the second point of your question, which is EMP strikes. EMP strikes are a threat. An EMP strike is potentially going to disrupt the electronic devices, anything that has a printed circuit board. So phones, tablets, televisions, computers, the control module, electronic control modules for cars built after 1985. Anything that has an electronic circuit, if it is exposed to an electromagnetic pulse of a high enough voltage, it will fry that electronic circuit and it's no good. And what an EMP does, electromagnetic pulse does, is it creates high voltage. It's a wave of high voltage electricity that is much higher than the circuit is designed to withstand, and it just fries the circuits. And we're talking in the range of voltage of a lightning bolt, that kind of voltage. So the problem with EMP preparedness is it's all theoretical. There is very little testing that has been done to prove the theoretical models of EMP shielding. So there are plenty of people out there who will sell you EMP shielding devices, EMP containers, cloth that you can buy to make EMP shielding for things. I've got a couple of, I've got a little EMP bag over there for my laptop and another EMP bag for my cell phone, which I don't use very often. Because EMP shielding, like I said, it's all theoretical. I've read a lot of online forums, posts by people who are very knowledgeable. They're very knowledgeable. And they have pointed out a lot of the theoretical flaws in people's attempts to create EMP shielding. And the big problem that I have is that in a real world situation, if a particular area was subjected to an EMP strike, the voltages that are going to be induced in that area are so high that you would have to have an incredibly thick material and have to have that container really well sealed and grounded in order to protect whatever is inside of there. And still, there is a likelihood that the voltage is going to be so high, it's going to fry the circuit anyway. I'm not convinced that any kind of EMP shielding is actually going to work. So I don't really have any preparations for EMP shielding. I know a lot of people do. It's really, really big in the prepper community, where people will take radios, computers, whatever, and put them in Faraday cages of various kinds to, in theory, protect from an EMP strike. If you want to do that, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Maybe it'll work. I just personally haven't been convinced that it's going to work. And number one. Number two, God has not led me to do any EMP protection for any of my equipment. I really rely heavily on God to lead me in what I'm supposed to do. God has been talking to me about mesh networking, Arden networking, Mesh-tastic, amateur UHF, VHF, HF radios, and building antennas, creating all of these, networking with people, communicating a lot of different ways, the Zolio stuff. But he has never yet hinted to me that I need to take EMP precautions. So for whatever reason, God has not put that on my radar yet. If he does, I'll let you know. Yes, if an area gets hit by a powerful enough EMP, yeah, your car is going to be toast. Your car will not work. If it has an electronic control module, like I said, if it was built after roughly 1985 was when they started putting in, they went away from standard points and condenser ignition and went to electronic control modules. Cars would be non-operable. They just wouldn't work. And all electronic devices wouldn't work that were subjected to that pulse. So potentially a big problem. Like I said, we have some serious issues to consider and weigh, and you can't prepare for everything. My model for preparedness is preparing for the events I think are the most likely and the ones that are going to be potentially the most devastating to my way of life. That's what I'm preparing for. All right. Jenner, can you hit the little mute button on your microphone on the screen?
Hello.
Hey there.
Hi there. Hey, thanks, Dave, for all you do. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a couple of questions for you. Now, in the situation that we're under an occupation, am I correct? You wouldn't want to use a GMRS system?
What do you mean by occupation?
A foreign country takes us over. Like in the movie Leave the World Behind?
I did not see the movie Leave the World Behind. I heard about it. I saw some of the trailers. I don't know what the actual scenario of that is.
I think it was kind of implying that a foreign country had taken the
Okay,
U.S.
so you're talking about a situation where, let's say, China actually captures our government and we are now under actual Chinese rule, and China is now calling the shots, something like that?
Correct. Like a GMRS is not a private communication, whereas a Meshtastic, I think, is encrypted.
True.
So could you speak a little bit on the differences there? And then my second question was faithfulness versus preparedness. So in faithfulness versus preparedness.
Okay.
So in chapter 32 of your book, you speak a little bit about faithfulness. And if we spend all this time over preparing, does that imply that maybe we aren't as faithful as we should be?
Okay, I'll address both of those issues.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you've obviously read some of the book, maybe you read the whole book, and you know that in the book there is a chapter on communication security, ComSec. All right. The book is written to address two different types of scenarios. It's written to address, number one, a scenario where you're able to talk to people in the open using open airwave communication, and there is no immediate threat to you by communicating over radio. Right? So we're talking maybe a natural disaster hits, and you're living in a part of the country that power outage happens, internet is down, cell phone service is offline, and you need to communicate to people during a natural disaster. So you get on your GMRS radio and you happen to find a GMRS repeater that is powered by solar or a backup battery or a generator, right? Because in a power outage situation, most repeaters are not going to be working. And that's something to think about. Here in the Phoenix area, there's more than 100 UHF and VHF repeaters. Probably after about a week or two, I would imagine only about 6 of them will be operational. And after a month, maybe 1 or 2 of them will be operational. I know that there's one about 10 miles north of me that is completely operated on solar. It's not even grid powered at all. It just operates on solar. It's got a solar battery and a solar panel, and that's 100% of the time that repeater is operating on solar. And we have regular weekly nets on that repeater. But to answer your question, in a situation that is non-hostile, where there's not an enemy listening to your communications, you're fine communicating over the air, using normal channels of traffic. However, if you're in a non-permissive environment, if you're in a hostile environment, and I wouldn't go to the point where, let's say China or Russia has captured our government and we're now under foreign rule. I think that our own government has bad actors who are listening to our communications, and we should probably be taking some steps to be more secure in our use of communications. So I've had a number of dreams over the last year where I saw the government, let me just say it this way, the information warfare that we're seeing on social media spilled over into the radio domain. And the same kind of tactics for censorship, surveillance, intercepting communication was happening on the radio spectrum. Okay? So I'm just giving you guys a heads up that these people have an agenda and they've thought this out pretty far down the road. And even if we're able to get on the air and communicate, there's still going to be opposition from our government. Definitely opposition from a foreign government, but our own government has a lot of bad actors who do not have our best interest at heart. So I think in a situation where you know that there are, or suspect that there are people out there who are eavesdropping on your conversations, it's good to increase your communication security measures. That can be anything from not being on the air running your mouth every hour on the hour about what you're seeing, what you're learning, what you're knowing, what you're doing, and where you are. A lot of people just have this gift of blab where they want to talk about everything all the time on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Telegram. They're just constantly putting out signals about what they're doing, where they are, who they're eating with. Oh, hey, here's what I ate for dinner. Here's my cat, here's my dog, here's my this. They just constantly sending out signals. Well, in a non-permissive, in a hostile environment, too much chatter is going to be dangerous for you. And if you learn the lessons from the soldiers who fought in Afghanistan, they captured a lot of enemy combatants through their radio communication. These guys would regularly communicate on certain frequencies at certain times of day to certain people for certain purposes. And special forces guys were listening to those communications, gathering the information, making notes, creating a pattern of life. And they could then go in and using direction finding techniques for radio, they could locate them in and take them out. Communication security and operational security is going to be a very big thing, I think, in the near future. And so one of the principles of radio communication is do not be on the air talking if you don't need to be on the air talking. I suspect that during whatever event is going to come, you're going to be very well served if you learn to listen 90 to 95% of the time. Just listen to what is going on. Listen to AM and FM radio broadcasts. Listen to shortwave broadcasts. Listen to amateur radio broadcasts if you can. And just listen. And the cool thing is you can buy a shortwave radio. Texan makes a pretty decent shortwave radio that picks up the amateur radio bands. It has single sideband, and it's only $79 on Amazon. It's an inexpensive radio, and it'd be a very good tool to have in a situation like that where you want to listen to a lot of different bands and different places where people are talking about what's going on. The shortwave, especially at night, you can pick up distant radio stations from around the hemisphere, sometimes in the Eastern Hemisphere. So now one of the things that I think people need to just get cognizant of is if you're putting out too much information, whether it's on social media or on radio, you can give your opponent a lot of information they can use against you. All right. So there are ways that you can encrypt messages. Encryption is not allowed on amateur radio bands. It's not allowed on GMRS, and it's not allowed on FRS, Family Radio Service. It is, however, not prohibited on marine and MERS frequencies. You can use encryption on the marine bands and MERS. And there are encryption apps you can use to encrypt text messages. And there are apps you can connect to your radio that will send digital packets of data out as text messages that someone else can receive via radio. Encrypted texting over radio. Yes, you can do it. I have a friend who lives not too far away from here, and we have been communicating and practicing sending encrypted messages on bands where it's permissible. So there are ways that you can send encrypted messages via radio, short distances. You can also do it long distance over HF. You can send encoded messages. You can't legally send encrypted messages, but I'm sure some people are doing it anyway. So let's talk about Meshtastic. Meshtastic is an app. It's a mobile app, and it pairs with your phone or tablet. You install the app on your tablet or phone. You pair your phone to a little tiny radio device. I should have brought my props here all sitting over there. Little radio, puts out very low signal power. I think those little LoRa radios operate on that 900 megahertz frequency, and they put out about 1/4 of a watt of power. They don't consume a lot of energy. They're very easy to power using a little tiny solar battery charger thing. Those radios, what they do is whenever they're turned on, powered on, they send out a signal. And you can, using the Meshtastic app on your phone or tablet, you can create a channel and invite people to your channel, and you can send text messages back and forth over radio, and they're encrypted. Because the 900 megahertz frequency does not require a license, and it does allow encryption. So Meshtastic is kind of a cool little deal because there's no license. The equipment is cheap. You can buy those little LoRa radios on eBay for about $30. The ones that I buy, they come with a 3D printed case and a little battery and off-on switch. They're more expensive. They're like $40, but it's not terribly expensive. And I have tested those little devices and got 23 miles distance using those little tiny LoRa radios in the Meshtastic app. 23 miles was as far away as I could get where I still had line of sight to the receiving transmitter. I would imagine the effective range on those things is probably closer to 50 miles using a stock antenna. And in the book, I explain how I set up my little network where I've got a buddy who's got one on the roof of his house. He lives 10 miles away, and I've got one on the roof of my house 10 miles away, or here. And I have a second radio down here in my house that connects to my radio on the roof of my house, sends a signal to his house, and he's got a radio that connects to his phone in his house. He and I can send text messages over this network 10 miles away. We could do it if we were 20, 30 miles away. Encrypted text messaging, low power, no license. It's a good option for people who live some distance away. The issue is waterproofing because, again, it's radio and it's highly dependent on line of sight. So the reason why most handheld radios only have a range of about 3 or 4 miles is because UHF and VHF radio signals are absorbed by buildings and trees and hills. That energy, that radio signal just gets absorbed, and by the time you get 3 or 4 miles out there, there's no signal left for someone to pick up. You can communicate over much longer distances using UHF and VHF handheld radios if you have line of sight, direct line of sight between the radios. If you have an antenna on the roof of your house and somebody else has an antenna on the roof of their house, they live 10 miles away, and there's no obstructions between those two antennas, there's no forest, there's not a bunch of skyscrapers, you should be able to communicate with each other 50 miles, even using low power radios. Like I said, those LoRa radios, their power is about 1/4 of a watt. That's not a lot of power. But if you have clear line of sight, you can communicate using those devices. UHF and VHF radio, whether it's handheld or these LoRa devices, highly dependent on where you are located and what obstructions are between you and the person you want to talk to. All right, I'm going to land it there. Let's see. Shannon, you still have your hand up, and you're the only one with your hand up. Does anybody else have a question? Let's see. Gossamer. All right, Gossamer, you got your hand up. Gossamer, if you can unmute yourself, hit the little unmute button on there. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon from the East Coast.
G'day, mate. How's it going?
Going good. So if comms really are shut down by our illegitimate government due to any kind of like attack or anything, what does it really matter if we are operating a transceiver unlicensed? I mean, if the government is already illegally subverting comms, what does it matter if I have a license and need to communicate or just listen?
There's a flip side to that question, right? And you're not saying it, but you're kind of implying it. If the government is illegitimate, the licensing agency itself is illegitimate, does it then matter whether we have a license or not? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, pretty much. Because, I mean, I'm a big fan of like Hogan's Heroes and all the old World War II movies. And you always saw the resistance fighters and, they always were communicating. And, I can guarantee that was illegitimate communications that they were having. Yep. So if we're in that same kind of situation.
Okay. This is a very important subject to bring up because all of everything that I've been talking about up to this point assumes that we are dealing with a legitimate government that is legitimately in power, that has legitimate licensing authority over law-abiding citizens. Okay? You're talking about, but what if the government itself is illegitimate? Does that not negate the legitimate licensing authority of all federal agencies? A case could be made that it does, that it negates the legitimate licensing authority of the FCC. And then at that point, you're going to have people say, all right, so then we can just talk on radios without having a license because the licensing authority, the licensing agency has no authority to license us anymore. And there are going to be people who will take that tack and they will say, well, screw you with your license. And we don't care if you say we can't talk on radio. We're going to talk anyway. I absolutely expect that especially if the Biden administration imposes martial law, or if they, using the War Powers Act, if they restrict domestic communications, and if they shut down radio communications, there's going to be a ton of people who are going to set up pirate radio networks. They're going to be talking anyway. They'll be doing whatever they have to do, and they're going to dare the FCC to send out their goon squad and come and shut them down. Life during wartime is quite interesting, I hear. Haven't lived it myself, but I'm a big fan of Hogan's Heroes and Band of Brothers and all the old World War II stuff. The glory days of rabble rousers. I think there's going to be a lot of people who will thumb their nose at the authorities and say, you know what, you're not legitimate. We don't care what you say. We're going to do our stuff and dare the licensing agencies to try to do anything about it. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that I suspect a lot of people will just thumb their nose at the licensing agency and say, screw you, we're going to do what we're going to do. Good point.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good question. Sammy Joe Luce. Sammy Joe, if you can unmute yourself, what is going on today?
Hi, Dave. Love your ministry. Been following you for a while.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My question is, I was listening to an earlier scenario about being under martial law and the different things that would go on, and that, you're in close contact with a lot of prophetic people. My question is, do you see anything positive coming out of this, God intervening miraculously and delivering us from some of this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I've been getting accused by people of being black-pilled. and prophesying gloom and doom. There is absolutely nothing. You're not going to meet anybody who's more white-pilled than I am. I am absolutely optimistic. I'm absolutely have a positive outlook on the future. I know for a fact God is going to do glorious things in the coming days. However, we have to go through a season where we continue to expose the corruption in institutions. That exposure has to continue, and as we continue to expose corruption, the regime is going to fight back, okay? Steve Bannon said it years ago. If you think these people are going to give you back your country without a fight, you are sadly mistaken. We have been in a fight against this corrupt regime for years trying to take back our country. They're not going to give us back our country without a fight. That's bottom line. All right. We're in a battle we're either going to lose this country to the globalist communist regime, or we're going to take back our country and put them all in military tribunals. And I think we're going to put them all in military tribunals. I think we're going to take back our country. And I think that primarily because you're not going to force your will upon hundreds of millions of citizens who are heavily armed. The fact that American citizens are heavily armed is the one thing they can't get around. It is the ultimate deterrent to tyranny. And when push comes to shove, if they try to impose martial law and then tell 100 million armed citizens, you have to give up your guns, you can't carry them anymore, we're going to take your guns away, it's going to get ugly. I hope it doesn't come to that. But if you follow this out to the logical conclusion where all of this could potentially end up at, it's going to come down to a show of force. And I'll give you a couple of scenarios where I think that could go, a couple of directions. I don't think we're going to have a bloody revolution against the government. I think, and it seems pretty obvious, I think if you're paying attention, that the regime would love to foment a civil war where it's conservatives against liberals, it's red against blue, left against right. They had been driving that wedge into society, trying to get us to go to war against each other. That's what they want. They want us to go to war against each other. But that's not going to happen. Because as much as there is animosity between the conservatives and liberals right now, I don't see either side taking up arms against the other. Most of the conservatives I know, they don't want to go to war against liberals. They want to absolutely demolish the regime that is in power right now, the government regime that is in power. They want the FBI disbanded. They want DHS disbanded. They want the Department of Education disbanded. They want the federal government take an axe to that thing and just chop it up and destroy it and get rid of every vestige of the federal government that is not in the Constitution. Whatever is not given to the states in the 10th Amendment is for the federal government. Everything else should be gone. I think that's what people want. People want, their war is against the government. It's not against other, American citizens who just have different political ideas. So I don't think we're going to see a civil war. I don't think we're going to see a bloody revolution either, because I don't think the military will allow that to happen. If the regime gets to the point where they are drawing threats to themselves, legitimate threats of violence from patriotic Americans who are just fed up, I think, and I have reason to believe this, and look, there are federal agents in all of our social media channels. There's people from DHS and the FBI and the Department of Justice and the military. They're watching what's going on social media. They're listening to our conversations. They're listening to this broadcast. They're watching what's happening on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, and they're taking the temperature of the room. And if we get to a point in culture where they think there is a serious possibility that there may be a violent overthrow of the government, I think the military will step in and stop it and prevent a violent revolution. I hope there are some people in the military who have enough integrity to stop that from happening. If they don't, it's going to be very, very ugly. I pray that doesn't happen. I still believe that there are good people in the military who will step in and prevent the worst possible outcome. However, the threat of the worst possible outcome should give the regime some time to think about what they're doing. Now, to your question, am I prophesying doom and gloom? Do I see anything positive? I do see positive things coming from this. Look, we have to get rid of these people. Whether you're talking about Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, George Soros, all these globalist monsters who want to enslave us, and they're using Macron and Joe Biden and Zelensky and all their other puppets to enforce their agenda. We have to throw these people out and take back control of our countries and take back control of our government. And I absolutely believe that is going to happen. I am positive. I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be difficult. I think there's going to be a battle, but I absolutely believe we are taking back control of our countries. And we're going to reestablish the United States on the foundations of freedom, of liberty for all, and equal justice under the law for everyone, period. All right. Going to the next one. Carol Matiha. Carol, if you can unmute yourself. Carol, what is on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Dave? Good to talk to you again.
Doing good. Thanks for joining.
Okay, so twofold. First of all, if the military takes over, wasn't that going to happen because they're saying that Biden was an illegitimate president and Trump would take over? So wouldn't he be taking over? That's one thought. The second thought was, my kids, they're older and they think that I'm a lunatic. So I have spoken to them and I've said, if something is going down, I expect you to pack your car up, get in your car and stay with me. So at least I have them together because there's no way I'm doing this radio stuff because you got me crazy. But they talk about, we're not going to have another lock-in or whatever. Do you expect us to have another kind of lockdown?
I would anticipate they may try another COVID type lockdown. I think they'll try that, but I think there are other reasons why they may do that. And you know what? I'll give you some of those scenarios. What was your first question was about? You had two questions. One is about lockdowns. One is about
the military taking over.
The military. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll address both of those issues. All right. So I suspect one of the agendas that the regime is pushing for is having a legitimate reason to suspend next year's election. What did Zelensky do? Zelensky called off the election in Ukraine. Why? National security. We're at war. I think that Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and all of the commies in our elected leaders would love nothing better than to start a war and then use that as a pretext to cancel the 2024 election due to national security. So I think that is a very likely possibility. Now, what happens if the regime decides they're going to cancel a presidential election? Well, maybe the military steps in and says, okay, well, screw you guys. We are going to oversee an election here in the country. And we have a military that oversees the election. One day, paper ballots, bring your state-issued ID or don't show up, and it's all counted on one day. And and people come in, precinct people at their local precinct level count the votes, overseen by the military, and we have our election. I absolutely would expect that good people in the military might do that. So it's not a military coup, because the military isn't removing anyone from office. They're simply overseeing an election because our elections are rigged. And now 2/3 of American voters know and believe that our elections are rigged. We're coming to a point in the evolution of this country where the majority of the population is not going to accept the results of an election that is run through machines the typical way. I think we're moving toward a situation where the regime is going to try to remain in power by canceling an election, and some other entity is going to have to come in and oversee the election. And so to your question, does that mean Trump is in control of the military or Biden? It could go either way. I don't think there is a lot of support in the rank and file military for Biden administration. I understand that there's some woke tards at the top, some of the woke generals who are, in lockstep, not to Biden, but to the global regime, to the military industrial complex. But I think the average soldier in uniform despises what they're doing and would probably support a fairly held election. So I think that's a possibility. Now, to your second question, your kids, and having them come with you and let's see, I'm trying to remember what your question was. Are you still, let's see if I can, Carol, you know what? Carol, what was your second question? This is the danger of asking 2 or 3 questions because I sometimes forget.
Okay. The second one is having them, since they don't live that far, having them
Yep.
come up and stay with me
Okay.
if there's a lockdown or something like that.
Lockdown. All right. Yeah, let me address that. All right. The COVID lockdown was, it was an op. It was a psychological operation. The whole COVID scenario accomplished about 9 or 10 different objectives that the deep state needed to accomplish. And they used COVID as a pretext to accomplish all these objectives. They wanted to massively increase mail-in balloting so they could cheat and give the election to someone who would otherwise have no chance of winning the election, Joe Biden. They used COVID as a way to enforce their will and train people to become more compliant to the regime, to the experts. We need to lock you down. You need to wear masks. You need to take the vaccination because we say so, because experts. So they managed to further brainwash a significant chunk of the population with their little COVID operation. But if they're going to continue brainwashing us, and specifically if they need to lock us down physically, they're going to have to come up with another scenario, another plausible scenario where they can say, hey, there's a danger out there. Don't go outside. Stay in your house. What's the most likely scenario? Nuclear emergency. So they tell us that a nuclear bomb was detonated in our area and that there's a radiologic emergency and it's not safe for you to go out of your house. How do you prove them wrong? Do you have a Geiger counter? I do. Sitting in my closet on a shelf. I would absolutely expect them to come up with some plausible scenario. They could detonate a conventional warhead, very large conventional warhead, and tell an entire city it was a nuclear bomb. There's radiation out there. Stay in your homes for 2 months until we tell you to come out. And they effectively just lock everybody down with a nuclear emergency that doesn't even exist. Dirty bomb, another one. They could detonate a dirty nuclear bomb and then tell people, well, we had a dirty nuclear bomb. There's radiation exposure out there. Stay in your house or you're going to die. There's many different scenarios I can see them pulling off to try to force people to lock down. And, you can buy Geiger counters. They're not that expensive. I got mine on Amazon, and I learned how to use it, and it's actually pretty cool. So if they try to tell me here in Phoenix that we were exposed to a nuclear bomb, and I go out with my Geiger counter and I'm checking everything, and there's no radiation anywhere, I'm going to call BS and do what I want to do, and they can pound sand. All right. So, Aunt Niece, if you can unmute yourself, what's on your mind, sister? Are you there?
There's the mute button.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Follow up to the licensing question.
Yes.
Aside from the question of legitimacy of the licensing authority, the training for the license, how useful is that for preparing people to operate a radio successfully?
The training for the license. Boy, that is a good question. When I went in and got my technician amateur license, I just memorized the correct answers to 350 questions. They take the questions for the amateur radio licensing from a large pool of questions, and you see 35 of the pool of 300 or 400 questions. So I just went in on the amateur radio test sites, and I just went through question after question after question. They give you can take these test questions, and the test questions are the actual questions you'll see on the test. And you can guess at the right answer, and they tell you what the right answer is, right? So I just memorized the correct answers. Some of the information I learned in taking the test was very helpful for me in practice once I got my license. A lot of it wasn't. Do I need to know the nuances of capacitance and reactance? No, I really don't. I mean, and once I got into HF radio and I started learning how to tune antennas and get antennas cut down to the right length and using a tuner to tune the antenna and tune the radio so that the radio signal would resonate on the right frequency on this wire. And then I started to learn about inductance and capacitance and reactance. It actually started to make sense to me a little bit. A lot of the stuff, though, that you learn taking the test probably doesn't really need to be known to operate the radio. Some of it does, some of it doesn't. It depends on what level you're operating at. I think it's good to study, get the information down. I watched a YouTube channel that had that walked you through sort of the information on the test, and it was helpful for me. I'm glad I did it. Some of the information is not like all that relevant, but a lot of it is.
Okay.
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 All right.
Thank you.
You bet. Let's see who is next. TA, I see that you have your hand up. If you can unmute yourself. What is going on this afternoon?
Hi. Thanks for taking my question.
Absolutely.
I was on X and I saw that if there's martial law and they crack down and they will start coming after the patriots and that they've marked our mailboxes. I kind of live out in a rural area. And so I went out and I looked on my mailbox and I did have 2 red dots on it. Now, I heard that it could be that I don't want flyers, but I never specified that. Then somebody else said it could mean that you have dogs. But another person who I know is a patriot, they had 4 red dots on their mailbox. And they have 4 people living in their house, adults living in their house. So, and I know they didn't have 4 dogs. So have you heard anything like that? Do you know what those?
Nope. No, I don't know anything about that. Nope.
Okay. That was my question. I mean, we
Okay.
removed them, but just in
Yeah,
case.
I have no information on that.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Let's see, Doug Cofield, you have your hand up. If you can unmute yourself, Doug, what's going on?
Hi, Dave. How are you?
Doing good.
I wanted to speak just a little bit to the EMP
Okay.
discussion.
Yep.
I am an electrical engineer, so I have a little bit of knowledge surrounding
Awesome.
this.
You should take the ham radio technician test. You'd pass it with flying colors.
Probably. I did listen to your show on the Mestastic and have built some of those
Oh, okay, cool.
to play with. So, you know, an EMP really is just a magnetic pulse. There's not really an electrical component to it until it reaches a wire, an exposed wire. The
Right.
big problem is the power lines that are miles and miles long. There, as you said, there'll be a massive amount of voltage induced into those wires that'll come into your house, and it's liable to not only fry everything in your house, it could set your house on fire quite
Yep.
easily.
Yep.
So one thing to think about is if you have, you know, some ham radio or devices that you cannot lose in a situation like that, don't have them plugged in at the time. Keep them
Right.
unplugged unless you're using them.
Unless you're using them, unplug them every time. Yeah, having the device energized into the household current is a risk for that for sure.
Right. And I'm a little of a slightly different thought on shielding and vehicles. I agree that you really don't know what's going to happen, but if you can shield the magnetic pulse from the wiring, whether it's in your car or whatever. I mean, if you have a car, it's basically a metal envelope. Most of the wiring is under metal. You know, you park that under a tin roof building. I think there's a chance it might survive, but like you said, there's no real guarantee of any of that.
Yeah, well, that is absolutely possible. I have heard arguments both ways from people who are electrical engineers and who know a little bit about the subject, who say that you absolutely can shield from EMP, and then there's other people who disagree. So there's a lot of room for views on that subject, I think.
Right, and electricity does need a path to ground or a conductive path to something to cause the problems. So just like a car a lot of times can be hit by lightning and not be, or an airplane can be hit by lightning and not be severely damaged because there's no place for it to go.
Right.
So I mean, putting something in a Faraday cage or a metal box or a microwave, I think there's a chance that could survive. So I think it's worth investigating.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of people who are doing it, and I hope it works.
That's all I had.
All right, thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Yep, bye.
All right. Susan. All right, Stacy. Stacy, your hand is up. If you can unmute yourself, what is on your mind today?
Hi, Dave. Nice to talk to you. I've followed you for a long time, way back into the Q days with your Q Deciphers. So
well,
awesome.
Thanks for joining the live stream.
Yeah, my question is, and something I'm very, very, very concerned about, as well as most of the Americans, is all this, these immigrants coming from other countries, Mexico, coming across our border, thousands of them.
Millions.
There's something going on. There's something going on with this, and I wanted to know your thoughts on it because it's very scary. A lot of them now are military-age men. Are they planning to use these guys to fight against us? What is going on? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think Trump confirmed your suspicions in a rally that he held a couple weeks ago. He came out during the rally and said, so riddle me this. I just heard that there are 25,000 Chinese men of military age who have come across the border in just recent months. What are they doing? Are they building an army? I think that's exactly what they're doing. I think that all those people coming across the border are building armies that are loyal to foreign countries that will at some point be operationalized, and they'll be used to demoralize and try to destroy the American culture, the American country, homeland from within. I think we're just there. Biden is beholden to China and other foreign interests, and he is doing what they're telling him to do. I think President Xi told Biden, open up that border because I need to put 100,000 of my people in your country so we can then take over your country. And Biden said, okay, that sounds like a plan. How much money do I get to do that? Yeah, I absolutely believe they are building foreign armies in our country. And Trump has been warning us for a long time. We are going to pay a huge price for letting this happen. So we need to buckle up and get ready. Scott Nelson. Scott, if you can unmute yourself. Scott, what's up?
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I waited till the end. I've got a quick question on a different subject. I hope that's okay.
That's fine.
I heard you on an Elijah Streams episode say that if somebody wants prayer, they can connect with your prayer team that prays night and day.
Well, I don't really have a prayer team. My prayer team is me. But we do have a lot of people who pray for people in the Telegram channel. That's
what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
So I know a guy that's got a brain tumor and a short time to live, and so I'm thinking that might be a way for him to get prayer. But I don't know how the technology works. Does he just get on Telegram and just write a comment in the comment section saying, prayer people, please
You
pray
can do
for
it
me?
yourself. You can do it yourself. You can just go on the Telegram in the chat and just say, hey, I have a friend. His name is whatever. He's got a brain tumor. Can you guys pray for him? And people will then go in. And when you see the little prayer emojis show up on that post, that tells you 12 or 13 or 14 people are praying for that person.
Okay. Is there any communication back and forth, like for him to say more as they're praying?
Yeah, if he wants to.
Just writing through the chat?
Some people who put in prayer requests will give updates, ask for further prayer. We have some people in the chat who have been asking for prayer on the same issue or related issues over the course of 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
So if he wants to do that, he can absolutely come in, ask for prayer, give us updates on his condition, ask for more prayer.
Okay. And so you communicate back to him through the emojis or something?
I personally...
No, just the people praying.
I don't respond to everybody who puts a prayer request in the chat. Sometimes I'll respond to them, say, hey, I'm praying for you. Most people will signify that they're praying for that person by putting a prayer emoji on their on the request. And then other people will come in and say, hey, I'm praying for you. And they'll actually write out their prayer. So
okay. Great. I want people. I just heard you talking about, what faith is for healing, and it's actually knowing that somebody's going to get healed. So I wanted people like that praying for these guys.
It is.
Well, I can't think of the other point. So anyway, thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks a million.
All right, Scott. Thank you. All right. Margaret Rotan, who has 3 plugs in her picture. Margaret, if you could unmute yourself, what's on your mind?
Hey, I'm down to 2 right now. But anyway, thank you, Dave. Everything that you do. It's just wonderful. And I just I just want to emphasize with everyone, and I know you'll back me up on this, on how important it is for everyone right now to take their authority over the enemy and everything that's going on, nefarious activity, all of it. I always call them, like Tim Sheets does, the forever loser. But just Ephesians 6, take your authority, put on your armor of God every day, and we're going to get through this. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
You bet. We are going to win this battle because the prayers of the saints will give us victory over these evil people. We are going to win this battle. Let's see. Sea Ocean 2, if you hit the little microphone button on the screen,
Yes, hi.
Hey there.
I thought this was a movie, and I thought Biden was an actor. And I thought that there was a fake inauguration. There's so many things that point to him wearing a mask and being controlled by the military, and Trump's in control. So why all the fear?
Oh, that's a fair question. There are actually a lot of people who have been under the impression that the cabal has already been executed. They've been at Gitmo. They've had their executions. Everyone running around in D.C. is all, clones or people wearing masks. I've never bought into that narrative. I don't think it's true. That's just not how I see things. You're welcome to disagree, but that's not how I see things. Billy, if you can unmute yourself, what is on your mind today?
Hello.
Good day.
Yes. So I wanted to ask you if you still maintain that devolution has been set forth and that it is an actual reality. That's it.
Oh, all right. Well, devolution has always been a theory. It is still a theory. We will not know if devolution is a fact until Trump lets us know that it's a real thing, that it actually happened, that he did devolve the government, that all these executive orders did have the effect that we thought that they had. It's always going to remain a theory until Trump verifies to us that it actually happened. So yeah, I think devolution is still, the evidence that John put forth, digging into all the documents, looking at all these, all the information, I think creates a compelling theory. Do I know for a fact that it's true? No, I don't. It's a theory. And, one day we'll probably know whether it was, in fact, or just an interesting idea. All right, Mo, 1959 Richards. Mo, if you can unmute yourself, what's going on, sister?
Hi there.
Hey, Mo, what's going on?
I didn't mean to be on your video. I've just been pressing buttons. Hello, Dave.
Well, you hit the camera button by mistake, apparently. You can shut it off if you want, but what's up?
It doesn't matter.
All right.
I wanted to say hello, and I miss you. It's great seeing your face every time you're on. My plan for all this that's happening, because I'm with you, I could care less about politics. As far as prepping, we live in North Georgia. My husband's an electrician. I'm ready. As far as communication, I had one question. The devices that you put to your kids, it's called Zoleo?
Zoleo. Zoleo.
Okay. And these are little devices that, could you just say real quick again, or I just go on Amazon and check it out, or? Because my kids live in Georgia too, and they're like 20, 30 miles from me. And I just, when it happens,
I should have
be able to get to them.
Yeah, I should have brought my props with me when I started the live stream. That is a Zoleo device. It's about the size of a pager, and it's just got a little power charging thing over here on the side.
Yeah.
And it's got little lights on it that tell you when it's powered up and when it's receiving a message. There's an emergency SOS button over here on the side. If you're in an emergency, you hit this little red button here, and that sends out an alert to search and rescue to come find you. Yeah, I'm trying to remember if I bought mine on Amazon or where. I don't remember. It was on sale for like $150, so I bought 3 of them, one for me and one for my kids. And then I activated the data plan, and my kids and I have sent some test messages back and forth, and it works.
Is there like a screen on there that reads? I mean, how do you text message?
Nope.
I mean, how do you see it?
Yeah. So the device sends out a Bluetooth signal, and you pair your phone to the device.
Okay.
Okay. So you turn your phone on, you turn on your Bluetooth, you see the Zoleo device number on the options for pairing with the device. You pair your phone with the satellite communicator, and once it's paired, they're paired together, then you can send text messages on the app on your phone.
Okay.
If text messages go to this, it goes out on the satellite network.
Cool.
Cool?
I appreciate that. And there's only one plan any of us need to follow, and it's God's plan, and that's what I'm here to do.
God's plan. And look, the reason why I'm doing all this stuff is because God has literally given me more than 100 dreams over the last 2 years about communication.
I wish I could dream.
And all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, Lord, I can't tell you about all the ham radio dreams I've had just in the last couple of months.
So that's why I'm interested in it, is because when you talk about the things you dream about, it comes straight from God. And that's what, when you throw your interest into specific things, it's because you're being led to do that. And that's why you did it with Q. That's why you did it. That's why you're doing this. That's why you're doing all your books. I mean,
I had 3 or 4 years straight of dreams about physical healing, emotional healing, authority, power, deliverance, all the supernatural ministry. God was teaching me for years all the nuances about healing ministry. And I just was getting the dreams and trying to follow what God was showing me. Then it went to Q. I had hundreds of dreams about Q. Only reason I got into Q is because God started giving me dream after dream after dream about Q. Same thing with all this stuff. God's been giving me dreams for 3 years about this, and I'm just trying to be obedient.
And you're doing a great job, and it perks my ears up every time I hear you talk. So I love you. Tell Denise hello. It's
Thanks,
great
Mo.
seeing your face. Happy New Year.
Good seeing you again, too.
All right, bye.
Bye. All right. By the way, look what I got. Look what I got. I've been talking about Meshtastic and LoRa radio. This is a LoRa radio device. It's a little tiny radio, and it's got a little antenna on it. Like I said, it's about 3 inches long, about an inch high, about an inch wide. This one has a 3D printed case and a little removable antenna. You can put different antennas on these. And they're not terribly expensive. It's got a little LCD screen on there. When you pair your phone with this device, again, Bluetooth, if you turn on your phone, turn on the Bluetooth, you'll see a little number of like a 4-digit number on the screen. That is the identity, the ID for this device. You put that in your phone when it is trying to connect to the device. You hit connect. It then pairs the radio to your phone. With using the mobile app, you can create a channel. You can send encrypted text messages to your friends if they have a device that's paired to their phone, right? Again, all of this communication requires the other person to have a similar device on the same frequency at the same time. Although one of the nice things about these LoRa is LORA, stands for low power, long range radio. Okay. One of the nice things about these devices is I've got an old phone over there on my desk, and I keep this powered on all the time. Keep this powered on. I keep my phone powered on over there all the time. And if someone on our channel sends me a text message in the middle of the night, because my radio is powered on all the time, and the channel, this radio is connected to another radio that's on the roof of my house, and that radio is connected to my buddy's house 10 miles away, right? Anyone who is on our channel, we have these two nodes create a network. Anyone who's on the network who sends a message in the middle of the night or anytime, I can go out, check my phone for messages hours later, days later. With with handheld radios and non-handheld radios, but mobile and base station radios, you have to be on the air at the time to get the message. With Meshtastic and these LoRa radios, they'll actually save the message for you. So you don't have to be on the air all the time. The radio is always transmitting. It's always transmitting, always receiving. And whenever a message comes over the network, it goes into your phone, appears on your phone device, and you can go check the phone and find a message whenever you want. It's a little bit more convenient way to communicate if you don't want to be like on the radio all the time, waiting for someone to send you a message. All right. Let's see. Todd has his hand up again, but Carol D. Carol with a D, if you can unmute yourself. What is on your mind, Carol?
I sent you a note asking for where I would contact for prayer support for spinal cord injury.
Okay.
And you had sent me a note back saying that you were praying for me, and I'm just saying thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely. If you need prayer for anything, just send me an email, and I will pray for you.
Absolutely. My question is, I'm hearing, we've heard so much about the woke military all over the place, and I've also heard things about the white hat military and the black hat military. What are your thoughts on that? As far as if martial law were to be enacted, what would that look like given partly woke, partly not? You know what I'm kind of referring to?
Oh, yeah. I'll answer that. All right. All right. So there is a perception in society that the military has gone woke and that the military is useless. Write them all off. They can't fight a war. They've completely been co-opted by the deep state, and they're all into trans, LGBTQ, diversity, equity, inclusion. They're just all woke, and there's no hope for the military. Just write them off. Okay? There's some people who believe that. That's fine. They're welcome to believe that. I kind of doubt that that's the reality, because under President Trump, who was in office just 3 years ago, that wasn't the case. The military was not woke. And there were some people in the military who embrace wokeness and all that, but it's a very small minority. And I'm not going to say that there are not some commanding officers who have bought into that stuff. They absolutely have. I think that the lion's share, the vast majority of people in the military are not woke. And even though they're taking orders through their chain of command right now from people who are woke, I think that will probably change at some point in the future. I think there will be a change in the chain of command. And I'm not going to get into the details about how I think that will happen. But chain of command does change from time to time. And Trump has already said that he's looking at putting Chris Miller back in as Secretary of Defense. And I would imagine Ezra and a lot of the usual suspects are going to come back into the Defense Department and continue what they started in reforming the military and making it the fighting unit that it needs to be. So, that's my thought. I don't know anything about the black hat, white hat military. That I know nothing about that. So can't comment on it. All right. Shannon, you have your hand up again. Do you have another question or observation?
Yes, I just wanted you to possibly expand on the prearranged plan like you have with your son. Like, yep. I don't expect you to give all of the details, but just a framework.
Yep. Happy to do that. All right. Let's see. I have written up a comprehensive communication plan. It's probably 8 pages in Microsoft Word. And actually, in fact, this book, Emergency Preparedness and Grid Down Communication, is largely built off of the communication plan that I came up with. And my communication plan has specific steps to take to reach certain people in certain places. And actually, one of the chapters in this book, after I go through all of the options for radio, for LoRa and Mesh-tastic, for satellite devices, for Arden mesh networking, for HF radio and UHF radio and Marine and MERS and all the other iterations, ways that you can communicate with people. I then have a chapter that is a radio reference guide that explains which radios, which software, which devices can be used to communicate with people in your neighborhood, and then at the city level, at the county level, at the state level, nationwide, and worldwide. So there are some devices, some radios, some software you can use to communicate with people in your neighborhood. Some of those devices can be used to communicate people within your city. A few of those devices can be used to communicate with people in your county. A couple of them can be used to communicate statewide, and then nationwide, and then around the world. There are very few devices that allow you to communicate globally or nationwide. You're basically looking at amateur HF radio and satellite communication, if it's available. And one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of amateur HF radio is if the satellites go down, HF radio is it. Amateur HF radio was the first internet. It was the internet 100 years ago, and it may be the next internet. Because amateurs who are on the HF bands their signals will skip hundreds or thousands of miles away. They can talk to each other. It's all battery operated. We've got solar panels. We've got generators. We can keep our radios going. We can keep communicating. We're not dependent on anything. We own the infrastructure. We own the network. So to your question, I've talked to my kids and explained to them, look, here are some likely scenarios, things that could potentially happen. We could end up at war. We could end up with a cyber attack. I mean, we're already having cyber attacks here in the U.S. Every single day. I see news headlines about companies that have been hit by cyber attacks, power companies hit by cyber attacks, telecom companies hit by cyber attacks. I think cyber attack is a very real possibility, especially if we go to war with someone like Iran, we are going to suffer massively cyber attacks, just guarantee it. Because Iran has a lot of people who are dedicated to that domain. Cyber attacks are their bread and butter. And so I'm talking to my kids and giving them some possible scenarios. You wake up in the morning, your cell phone won't connect to the network. You can't communicate by text message. You turn on your computer and there's no internet connection. What do you do now? Right? So I'm talking with my kids about, well, try this. And if that doesn't work, try this. If that doesn't work, try this. And letting the kids know, here's ways that you can communicate with people in your area, because my kids have friends and relatives in their area that they want to communicate with, not just me. So I'm bringing them up to speed on ways they can communicate with their people and also communicate with me. But, the communication plan also has if things become untenable, if your residence is under threat of being taken over by a violent mob or whatever, get the heck out, get your butt down here. And we have a plan. We have a long-term plan here at my place for survival. That's the backup plan for them. And so you need to just have a conversation with people that you're close to, and get on the same page. Get some understanding of what the possible threats are, what the possible solutions are, what the bug out plan is going to be, and all of that. I hope that answers your question. All right. Kathleen Graham. Kathleen, if you could unmute yourself, what's on your mind?
I think I'm ready now.
I can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much. The phrase, perhaps we were meant for times such as these, come to mind. Thank you so much for listening to God's promptings and helping us all to get prepared mentally, emotionally, spiritually for what's to come. It's exhilarating. It's a little amazing. It's terrifying.
A little, all of it, yeah.
Especially
it's like a big crazy roller coaster park. I swear.
It is, and I'm always so shocked. I'm 72. I still work full time as a nurse in a family practice clinic. Only one in my whole clinic that didn't get pushed into doing what I didn't want to do. They're all so unaware. It's like, so I just do the best I can and pray for them to get their eyes open before something really bad happens. But I just wanted to talk about food. I hope everybody's getting their food supplies in order, and water, a way to filter water is so important because bottled water isn't going to last. And that's about all. Just thanks be to God for his faithful people.
Thank you, Kathleen, for your words of kindness and encouragement. So those are all good observations. General preparedness for emergencies, whether you're preparing for a power outage. I lived in the Pacific Northwest for 16 years. We had power outages all the time due to windstorms. The windstorms would come, those big old Douglas fir trees that are 125 feet tall that have roots that are like that shallow would topple over and take down power lines every year. So we learned to prepare with generators and extension cords. Regardless of what natural disasters you're preparing for, and you should, if you live in an area that is prone to natural disasters, you should definitely be preparing. Food and water are the basics. You should have enough water set aside to get you by, and anybody in your family by, for about a week. That's kind of like the minimum for preparedness. Most experts say store 1 gallon of water per person per day for the duration of whatever you expect your crisis to last. So, start out with a week. If it's just you, store up 7 gallons of water in a closet somewhere at your house. That'll give you a supply of drinking water for 1 week. That'll last you during a crisis. It's not an expensive, purchase. And then you just go on from there. If next month you have another $10 to spend, buy 7 more gallons of water and store those 7 gallons. Then you have enough water to last you for 2 weeks. Again, and for each person in your family, you need to add water for them as well. Food is another consideration. I'm a big fan of canned food for several reasons. Food that is canned, number one, in the canning process, food is heated to kill any bacteria that could potentially cause problems. So canned food is cooked ahead of time. When you serve it, when you eat it, you don't have to heat it up, which means you don't have to find a way to, whether am I going to use my solar generator? Am I going to use a hot plate? Am I going to have to build a fire? How do I heat this food up? Canned food is already heated. You don't have to, and you can warm it up if you want to, but you don't have to. Canned food is already cooked. And canned food has an indefinite shelf life. Even though when you buy canned food at the store, it'll have an expiration date that's 2 or 3 years down the road. In fact, canned food has no expiration date. It has indefinite shelf life. Actually, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has come out and they've done testing, and they've say on their own website, canned food has an indefinite shelf life. You can store it forever. When you open the can, as long as the integrity of the can has not been compromised, if the can has not been punctured, and if you've stored it at a reasonably, decent temperature, you can eat canned food 25 years later. So canned food is a good option for preparedness. If you are going to store canned food, make sure you have a couple of can openers handy. And, whether or not you want to have paper plates, paper bowls, paper cups, paper, and then plastic utensils is another consideration, because if you get into a situation where you don't have a water supply, a lot of people don't know this, but if your local power grid goes down, it won't be too long before a lot of areas lose their water supply, because municipal water distribution systems require power, electricity, the pumps do. And although most municipalities have backup generators take gas, some kind of fuel. And if gas and diesel fuel are not being delivered because of, societal collapse or whatever, you may lose your water supply. And if you lose your water supply, that brings all kinds of issues in: showering, bathing, using the toilet, all that. That's all covered in the book. But do you want to be using your 1 gallon of water to wash bowls and plates and knives and forks? Maybe not. Maybe you'd rather just have paper plates that you can, throw away in a crisis. So just things to think about. A lot of people have been getting into freeze drying food recently. Freeze drying machines are becoming less expensive, although they still are pretty expensive, relatively speaking. Over $2,000 for a freeze drying machine. But I've got friends who have one, and they really enjoy freeze drying food. A lot of people are doing that. Freeze dried food has, again, a 25-year shelf life. And then you get into things like gardening. A lot of preppers have their own gardens. I don't. We have ornamental plants in our yard. I haven't felt led by God to do any gardening myself here. Arizona is kind of a weird climate. You can grow just about anything as long as you irrigate it, but the summers are pretty brutal. We had a pretty brutal summer. We had like 2 weeks where the temperature was between 115 and 120 degrees, and even our ornamentals just got roasted in the sun. Even though they were getting watered every day, a lot of them died because it was just too hot. But that said, a lot of people are getting into doing their own gardening. One of the issues that we found during COVID was how dependent we are on these fragile international supply chains. A lot of people are kind of unaware of how far away food is grown when it comes to us. And when the supply chain is broken because boats can't come into harbor and they can't dock and get unloaded, it was a wake-up call for a lot of people. And one way to break the dependency on these supply chains is to grow your own food. If you have enough room, raise some chickens, plant some eggs. Maybe you'll have some eggplants. Having your own food, whether it's livestock or plants, is a really good way to take back control of your life. Taking back control, ending your dependence on supply chains and someone else's, whether they want to feed you or not, provide food, the grocery store. It's just a good idea if you're able to grow food, grow your own food. It's a good thing. I've got a friend who has an indoor garden. He's growing it inside his house. He's got his grow lights. He's not growing marijuana. He's growing cilantro and celery and some other things that he likes to eat. If you don't have a lot of room outside, you can do indoor gardening too. Just some things to think about moving forward. All right. And that is going to do it for this live stream because nobody else has their hand up. I hope that this live stream has given you some things to think about. Like I said, I am not out here to prophesy gloom and doom. It's not my calling. It's not how I roll. I think that God is going to do amazing things in the coming days. He is going to help us take back control of some countries that have been out of control for a long time. He is going to help us. He is with us. He is going to give us strategies and tactics for taking back control of our governments and taking back control of our lives and ending the surveillance state and ending the, hopefully ending the child trafficking and all the other things that go with it. I mean, we talked about people coming across the border. Didn't really talk much about the child trafficking, but it's an industry. There are ads now all over social media where they're advertising for people to come and work with private companies that contract with the government to basically assist child trafficking. It's a huge industry. It's one of the many things that God is going to put an end to. But we're going to have to, it's going to be a battle. Like Bannon said, they're not going to give us back our country without a fight. We have to fight. Even though the warfare primarily is spiritual warfare, there are some tactics and strategies we have to employ in the physical world that are going to help us have victory over these people. All right, that is it. If you have comments, questions, disagreements, need clarification, you can always message me, email me through my website, prayingmedic.com. There is a contact page on that website and my other website, prayingmedic.org. They both have contact pages. You can go in there and just put in your email, put in your correct email address if you want me to reply to you about once a week or maybe 2 or 3 times a week. I reply to someone who's emailed me, and because they put in the wrong email address, the email bounces and they don't get it. So make sure you put your correct email address in there if you want me to respond to you. This is going to be up on Rumble later on today, and then I'll put it out on Truth Social and Twitter and other places. Thank you all for your continued prayer for me and Denise. We appreciate your prayers. Keep President Trump in prayer. He and his people need it. I believe Trump has a plan. I think that he knows what's coming and is preparing for it. Keep him in prayer. God is going to give us victory. Love you all. Take care. I'll catch you on the next broadcast.